Okay, we're at another fascinating site here in Jerusalem. We're at a place which you can see the ruins around me. It's called the Church of Kathisma. And there's a road right here, a very busy road. Jerusalem is over to this side, Bethlehem is over to this side, and this is a 5th century church that gives us very, very interesting insight into the history of the Dome of the Rock. Here's the site of the church that we're going to be surveying, and I thought I'd give you an aerial view and kind of correct my pronunciation here. It's Kathisma, which is seat, and you'll see the road here. And you'll see when they started building the road, they ran into these ruins and did some excavation and determined that this was, in fact, a 5th century church called Kathisma Church. And you can see the octagonal layout and the stone in the middle, which is a very important feature for us to understand and compare the architecture of the time in the 5th century that would have also influenced the Dome of the Rock. However, what it does is it gives us insight into the type of construction and building and the seat. Okay, 5th century, the church is already apostate, they're already worshiping Mary. So they're memorializing sites like this where they take a stone. Now they call this stone Kathisma, which means seat or throne. Okay, so look at it. This is a stone in the center of an octagonal pattern going around. Okay, so the Dome of the Rock has the same thing. You have a stone inside. Okay, you have an octagonal pattern around, and the early church believed that the Dome of the Rock stone, okay, the Jews call it the foundation stone, but that stone they believed was the judgment seat where Pilate judged Yeshua, okay? And so they built the Dome of the Rock over that stone because it was the judgment seat, okay? So we're going to take a look around this area and look at the evidence of what the early Christians built, okay? Because the Dome of the Rock, guys, it never matches any other mosque or anything else that we can see. So let's look at the octagonal pattern. We can see mosaics, okay? Lots of mosaics. Pillars, okay? And a stone, all right? So they're, like I said, they're already, worshiping Mary. But isn't that amazing? The same pattern and the same feature we see with the Dome of the Rock. An octagonal building, all right? We got foundations. They kind of reinforce some of this. But look at, this is the road. I mean, this is the road that you take from Jerusalem over there to Bethlehem over there, okay? So these are kind of reinforced to maintain the site a little bit. All right, we got these walls and foundations and different things. Guys, this is not any type of popular site, all right? You have to do your research to find places like this. But you can see its size. It's a little bit smaller than the Dome of the Rock, but it maintains many of the same features, okay? So what happened is the Muslims came in and overtook Jerusalem, and when they did, they kept the church, okay? Or that church was at least there to the extent that they rebuilt it and they kind of repurposed it, okay? So here is this octagonal feature right next to the road, ancient pillars with a stone in the middle. Now, we're talking about this stone because the early Christians recognized the Temple Mount not as the place of the temple, but as a place where Herod, or they believed Pontius Pilate, but now we know that Herod's palace is, okay? So they believed that that was the place of the judgment seat, okay? So they built places like this where they had a judgment seat in the middle in an octagonal pattern, okay? And the Dome of the Rock has similar features like this. You see, you got one row here, okay? You got one row there, so there's three. You got the judgment seat in the middle, where everything is built around the stone. You got one, you got another layer, and a third layer. The Dome of the Rock maintains similar characteristics as this, okay? So this church, it is at the time 5th century. So the Dome of the Rock was made at the same time, okay? So that was never a mosque. It doesn't maintain the features of a mosque. You can see here like a gate and entrance, all right? And this here is in the direction of Jerusalem. But this is amazing. A lot of this is not maintained as like a popular site by, the authorities here. But here we can get a layout of the area, right? So we have like a gate or a main entrance right here. It's kind of round. It's entering, okay? A large gate area. And then the various layers. Layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, and in the center is a stone, okay? So the Dome of the Rock maintains many of these same features. So what happened is the early Christians at the Dome of the Rock, they believed that stone related to where Christ was interrogated, a judgment seat. So this place is called Church of Kathisma. Kathisma means seat. Okay? Okay, as we continue to survey the area, I just want to give you some more diagrams of what this church looks like. Again, you have the Kathisma. I apologize, I just heard about this, I think the previous day before I went on site. And again, we have the rock, the Kathisma, the seat where Mary sat. At least that's what they say, on her way to Jerusalem from Bethlehem. Anyway, this octagonal pattern, which you see, is again what we'll look at in comparison with the Dome of the Rock. Now, I wish, guys, I could bring you on some of the early church history, because many of the Protestant Christians, they don't have any clue of this stuff, and it's interesting, nonetheless, to just know the history. So many of the churches, they, started building churches like this, the Dome of the Rock. Okay, again, our layout, we have the stone in the middle, the various layers, okay? And again, this is the seat, okay? So they viewed the Dome of the Rock church in a similar manner with a seat in the middle. Now, this is one place I encourage any of you, if you ever had a chance to go to Israel. Of course, you'll go to Jerusalem, but definitely go to Capernaum. Now, this is a map of the ruins of Capernaum, and they believe where Peter's house was. And the reason I'm showing you this is that there are various layers of ruins in Capernaum, and they believe this is actually Peter's house. And this is the reason I'm showing it to you, because within these ruins we have another octagonal church feature with a circle, okay? Again, this point here, octagonal with a circle, again, a 5th century octagonal church in Capernaum. And you can see the ruins of this there, and definitely go if you have the chance. So we have similar features. Okay, we have this 5th century church in Capernaum on the Sea of Galilee where Christ's ministry was, okay? And the Byzantines, they recognized it. There's other ruins there. You can see other types of buildings built over the site. But the main feature that stands out is this octagonal pattern. Again, that's Capernaum. So let's continue to view on site, but it's very, very interesting to see what the early Christians did, because modern Protestant Christians don't really, go to Jerusalem and, consider much. But early Christians, they did. They went on pilgrimage. The idea is the Muslims called Hajj, or the, early Jewish Christians went to Jerusalem for the feasts. Okay, so early believers did the same thing, and they went to certain sites there. And when they did, they eventually began to memorialize these sites so that the people could know what it was. Now here's an example of the mosaics that are down below the surface. So these exist all over the place in here, okay? In fact, many of the stones you see are remnants of the mosaics that were on the floor, various colors and everything. And we have seen those and examples of those in other sites at this era. For example, the Nia Church and some others. So, you know, this is a fascinating site. Now let's go over here, look at a old cistern. It's probably in here, but that's a little clogged up. But here goes down, and down below is an old cistern. So travelers would have stopped along the way in their pilgrimage in Jerusalem around the road and stopped here for water. But I mean, this is fascinating because it gives us real insight and information in history of what the thinking of the people was at the time. So at the time, they found a stone, they found something significant, all right, and then they built a octagonal shape around it. Now the reason this is significant to us is, as we shared in the previous video on Christ being judged, you know, he was judged in Fort Antonia, and in Fort Antonia there was a stone. There was a stone of some type of feature that Josephus describes, and it appears that the Christians recognized that stone on the Fort Antonia, and they built this structure around it. Then the Muslims came and, you know, rebuilt it so we see it unto this day. But let's remember, for us, it has to do with the significant place where Christ was judged in Jerusalem. So he was from Galilee. Galilee was a different jurisdiction than Pontius Pilate, who was the governor in Jerusalem. So he was sent to Herod, and Herod was in Jerusalem. Okay, so when he was sent to Herod, he went to the fortress, the Roman fortress at that time. That's where Herod was staying. And Josephus does describe the Fort Antonia as a little bit like a palace, okay? And it certainly didn't have this feature, but it did have this stone. It did have a stone, and that stone is a judgment seat, okay? So for us, the message is that's what the Muslims and Jews are fighting over, this stone. You know, not this one in particular, but under the Dome of the Rock. So the Jews call it the foundation stone. The Muslims say that's where Muhammad ascended to heaven. And the Christians are like, no, that's where Herod interrogated, you know, Christ. Okay? So it has to do with the judgment seat. Okay? And we want the truth. And the truth is in the gospel and the message of what Christ did for us. Okay, again, here's Kathisma Church. Again, the features, the rock, our layout. And now let's compare this to the Dome of the Rock. This is the inside of the Dome of the Rock with the round structure inside, similar to this layer. And then we have what's called the foundation stone. The Jews call it. I forget what it's called in Arabic. And that's the stone in the middle. Here's some views of it. Here is some architectural layouts of the Dome of the Rock. So again, we have the round feature inside the dome, and then the octagonal on the outside. Okay, so again, just like Kathisma Church, we have octagonal, 3 layers, 1, 2, 3, and the seat. Okay, again, we believe this is like the bema or judgment seat that Herod would have had. Okay, and so that the early Christians would have built a site to commemorate this. So here's some other architectural layouts of this to kind of show us. We don't, of course, have the actual building of the Kathisma Church, but here's an overall of the Dome of the Rock. And I wanted to mention, while we're talking about the Dome of the Rock and the early church, this is something called Hagia Sophia. It's in Istanbul, Turkey, and it's a monumental church, enormous, with a dome. And some believed the early pilgrims that went to Jerusalem said there was a Saint Sophia church. So it's quite possible that the name of the church and the feature of the church that we're looking on as the Dome of the Rock today was a Saint Sophia church in Jerusalem. Now this one is just enormous. It is much larger than any of the others we have looked at, including the Dome of the Rock. But I just wanted to mention that because early pilgrims do mention seeing a Hagia Sophia church and ruins where the temple was. So they saw something on the Fort Antonia. They saw a church there, okay? And here we can see the area, trying to get you some aerial views. Okay, clearly the structure is built around this stone, just like the Dome of the Rock. Fascinating. Right next to a very busy road. This is this ancient road. Now here we are at site of the Dome of the Rock, and I just want to mention, guys, there's no political or religious affiliations we have. Here I am at the Dome of the Rock. It's exciting to be there. And so I'm going to take you just on some tours. We're going to talk a little bit about it. And you can see I'm standing here with a Galabea. This is a Muslim outfit. And it's not that we're Muslim, but it's their site, you know. And so here I am standing by the Dome of the Rock. I'm very excited. And now let's walk around and do some touring. Okay, so here we are on site. And we're just walking around, showing you the layout of the area. There's 4 entrances like this with the gates. And we have these gates. They're repurposed gates. There's lots of different time periods and eras that is going into the arches and the architecture there. You'll see different colors, different features of architecture. But you can see there are stairs that lead up. And these lead up at each position, north, south, east, and west. And here we're walking up one of the sides, and we're just making our early observations on the site. Now, one of the things that's very challenging for me to do as I do these videos and share this with you is try to convey to you what it feels like. In this video, we're kind of talking about that, what it feels like. You know, guys, I've hosted people and taken them on tours and brought them. And so the things I'm saying is not just my personal thoughts or opinion, but many of the people, almost all of them, when they come here, they do not get a sense of any type of holiness or glory or grandeur or anything, okay? And that's basically what we're feeling as we come here at this time. This was a good time. It wasn't too busy. But as I did more research and continued to go to the site and to begin to understand what is the message here? What is going on? I began to realize that this is, of course, a Roman fortress, Fort Antonia. And what's happening is, this is more than likely a place on this fortress, which you can see is very large, where Herod would have been. Now, again, to just explain quickly, Herod was in Jerusalem for the time of the Passover, time of the feast, and he would have come to Jerusalem at that time, and that's when the Lord Jesus and Christ was taken to Herod because he was in his jurisdiction of Galilee. So then I really begin to understand that what's going on here with the contention over the site and the contention over the stone that's around it is that early Christians recognized that this was a place where Herod interrogated Christ, called a praetorium, or judgment hall. And that stone inside it would have been a judgment seat. And that's really why the early Christians built this church, if it was called St. Sophia. Now, what you can see there is in the left of that photo is the where they believe the altar is. But we'll continue our tour and walk through the area at a previous time when I had just first come to the dome. Entering the staircase to the Dome of the Rock. Let's take a look at this particular one. We'll have to situate ourselves. I'm not sure what position we are, north, south, east, or west. And we're looking at the architecture. We have a sundial in Arabic. And here's the dome. Right here. And now we're on the plaza, open area. There's another arch there, we'll see another one there, and we'll take a look at this site. Okay, here at the, what wall is and gate is this? We're at the northern part of the Temple Mount, and we see the Dome of the Rock here. This is from the north facing, and we're just taking a look at the architecture here and looking at these. This appears very Roman. Temple Mount is really situated in a way that's more in a north to south arrangement than east to west, which the temple is. So that's why we believe this is a fort, and we're gonna walk around and take a look at the area. But there are trees and olive trees and a bit of a garden up here. So the reason we believe this is Fort Antonio is that from a military standpoint, it's very strategic to see out beyond. You have the Mount of Olives here. We're considering the true location of the Temple Mount to be to our south and to our west. But of all the things you see in Jerusalem with the various layers, it's quite obvious that this layer here would not have been at the time of the temple. However, it meets some Roman type criteria where we have these arches here and here, and we have this whole kind of raised platform, and if it's Roman, then they're doing it to worship, Zeus and stuff like that. So that's more than likely what we have here. But we've looked at some things, and what we'll notice is some ramps coming up in these various archways. We'll take a look at a few. Okay, here facing the Dome of the Rock from the east, and we see these stairways and arches. Certainly we're not certain any of this was standing, but if you take the traditional Temple Mount view of this location, basically you have this raised area, and then directly up against this east wall, which we'll have to kind of walk to show you, would basically place that east gate directly against that golden gate, which we've shown in the past. So this orientation of the traditional Temple Mount creates a real problem, because the whole raised area is really situated to a north and south, but the temple is a more east to west orientation, which we'll show you in maps and everything. Isn't that interesting? Here we have this stone. This stone is a seat, okay? And that concludes it, guys. The church, Kathisma Church, and the Dome of the Rock. Okay, this is part of our series and our playlist on the true location of the temple. Okay, and in some of this we have to look at what the temple is not. All right, and it's not a Roman fortress.